have with us Oscar Quevedo from Quevedo Port Producers in Oporto, Portugal. Welcome, Oscar.
Hello, Billy. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks for joining me. You to tell me a little bit about the history of Quevedo Port and your family history.
Well, my sister Claudia and me, we are the fifth generation of grape growers and winemakers. We are based in the center, in the heart of the Douro Valley, in the northeast of Portugal. For about 60 or 70 years since we started making port in 1889, we were not allowed to export the wine that we were producing, because there was an agreement with between the Portuguese government and the English government that protect the exports of port wine all from the city of Porto. So everything has to be shipped by the merchants based in the city of Porto. As we were based up in the valley, in the vineyards, those grape growers and producers, they could only sell to the merchants. And this lasted until 1986, which is the year that Portugal joins the European Union. So for all this time, until 86, my family was making the port to sell to the merchants, and then they would bottle it and label it after their own names and brands. After 86, we start bottling and labeling our own port. In 1993, I think is the first year that we start exporting. In 1999, my sister joins the company as the winemaker, and I did so in 2009, so 11 years ago. I'm in charge of the sales, and we now export 93% of the production to 32 countries. The top 5 are US, Canada, UK, the Netherlands, and Denmark.
In Denmark. Wow.
Yeah, these would be like the top 5, and then followed by France, Belgium, Japan, Australia, and probably Switzerland.
How about China? Have you been?
China, actually, we had a record year in 2019, but now with a virus, everything is on hold in China, or it was during this first months of the year. So I expect some recovery, and that we are able to still do some volume this year in China. We have a fantastic importer there, so hopefully things will go back on track.
Oh, nice.
But Chinese people are drinking, as their disposable income increases, they are drinking more and more foreign wine, and port is definitely among those consumed in China.
Awesome. That's excellent. And
it is.
Global economy, in many ways, it sure opens the doors for everybody and especially port. So, can you tell me a bit about your vineyards and where they're located and how many hectares you guys are currently farming?
Yeah. So we have a total of 121 hectares divided in 6 different properties. 3 of those properties are located along the Douro River. The altitude of the Douro, where we have the vineyards, is about 100 meters high. So all these 6 vineyards are, except one, are planted on the slope. So we planted on terraces, the vines. A lot of field blends, so old varieties all together in the same parcel. The new plantations we have been planting on blocks, always with traditional varieties from the Douro. As we go up in altitude, we can see that those grapes are more used to still wine rather than port. So port, we like to have a bit of an over-ripeness in the port grapes, not too much, but a little bit. And we get that better if you are lower in altitude, closer to the river, where the temperature is about 5 to 6 degrees higher than if you are on the top of the hill. So the winery is located at 650 meters above sea level, so on the top of a hill, which is cooler and windier, helping us to keep the temperatures cooler during the summer, but also helping when the temperatures go down in winter time to do a natural decantation of the wines. So we naturally have the sediment going to the bottom and clarify the wine. And so the vineyards are located in the center of the Douro Valley in São João da Pesqueira. Difficult name, but it's a key municipality in the Douro. It's actually the town with or the municipality with the highest density or the biggest production of grapes in the Douro Valley.
Simicorcora?
Yeah, it's in the border of Simacorgo with the Douro Superior.
Okay, thank you. I was trying
So of this area that we have planted, we have now 15 hectares that we grow under organic farming, and all the others are under sustainable farming.
Okay, is that is this the new? Is the Douro Superior area? Is that the new plantings? Is that the organic area?
You know, there it was until there was a boom of plantations in the Douro Superior, probably until 5-10 years ago. But with the global warming or the climate change, if you want to call it, I'm not sure if the Douro Superior is the best place to keep planting more vines. At least, definitely not on the Douro Valley area. So I will tell you why. Irrigation is now allowed, but until 2 years ago it was not allowed. And the rainfall that we have in Porto is more than what you get in London. But as we move inland, as we move east, it dramatically drops. So we have about 300 millimeters in our area, and we are not yet that much inland, or we are not all the way inland. So if you move further east towards the deeper Douro Superior, the rainfall level goes even further down. So I'm not sure if that's sustainable for the vine production. And maybe knowing that the temperatures are going up and the rainfall patterns are changing with less or more rain concentrated in a short period of time and less spread throughout the year. So we don't want to be in an area that suffers of drought.
Right, and heat stress on the vines.
Yeah, I think that there's not that much, in my opinion, there's not that much margin to grow further in the Douro Superior, at least in the warmer areas, for sure.
Okay, and so then where are most of your organic vineyards concentrated, or organic vines?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that much yet of organic production in the Douro. It's growing, but it's still relatively small. We are planting our organic, or we are growing our organic production in flat areas where you don't have to spend so much work cutting or keeping the weeds off the slope.
Okay.
So yeah, pretty much everything is done by tractor, and that's where we grow the organic. We have now red and white grapes under organic production, and that area is actually surrounding the winery, one of the parcels, and another one is about 2 miles away.
Okay, and so that predominantly goes into your still wine?
Predominant port.
Port?
For the first time last harvest, so in 2019, we made a red still wine.
Ah, okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So tell us about your line. Like, what are all the different styles of port that you make and wines?
So port can the merchants, the old merchants, they use it to be focused pretty much on red ports. one of the merchants, Mr. Coburn, he used it to say that the first duty of port is to be red. And this says a lot how they were approaching the white grapes and the white port produced in the valley. Actually, until for many for many decades, I think it is until 1920 that is forbidden to plant white grapes in the Douro. White grapes were seen as a way of diluting the concentration of the reds. Well, nowadays it's changing a lot. The market wants more and more white. I don't know the percentage of white grapes planted in the Douro, but I would say something around 20% and growing.
Okay.
So we first start, when you talk about port, maybe we should start with the whites and then talk about the rosé and finally get to the reds. So in terms of the whites, we have 4 different white wines that we produce. We have a dry style of white port with about 60 grams of residual sugar. We have a medium, which has about 90 grams. We have a sweet version, which is called Lágrima.
Ah,
Lágrima here. And we have, and this is, all these are relatively young. They tend to be 3 to 5 years old. We have also a reserve white that we started producing last year, which is an 8-year-old white port. And then you have a very small production of a special 30-year-old white port.
wow. And so, okay, your 30-year-old white port and your Lagoma, what is that what you call it? Lagoma?
Lágrima.
So is that something you export anyplace else, or is it mostly consumed there?
The Lágrima, we export a little bit to Germany and France. The
Okay.
30-year-old white port is actually exported to many countries as it's a great complement to the portfolio. Bring some premium luxury ports into that.
So it's 30, 30, 30? Oh,
30.
and
30.
how is that? How is it raised? What's the élevage on it? How is it?
It's this one has been in well, it was the bad luck of our grandparents that were not able to sell it because it was a white port. That is now our luck. Um,
That's
it has been aging in Tunel, which is the large oak bins, and we were wrecking it several times throughout these over 30 years that it already passed since its production.
so long.
The color is like a medium amber. The flavors arbitrate towards dry fruits, some dry flowers as well, a bit of like tea notes. It's relatively dry, which is a style of the family. My grandfather used it to say that the higher sugar, the sweetness would hide better the flavors, the bad flavors, but also the good flavors. And he told me, trust, if you trust in your grapes, you don't have to have so much sweetness. Let the sugar go down, so you can have more flavors of the grape instead of having so much sweetness. So we are always producing a drier style of port compared to the average. So it's not extremely dry. It's like a tiny bit drier, maybe 10 or 20 grams lower than the average, which is about 110 grams per liter. And then to level,
Yes,
it's the medium, like the medium sweet.
that's
We
right.
call it just white port.
Right. That's the one we.
And then we have the rosé port. So rosé port, like the category was first introduced in, I think it was February, so Valentine's 2009. And this was an idea concept developed by Croft, which is part of, together with Fonseca, is part of the how do you call it, Quinton Vineyard Bottlers, which also owns Taylor Fladgate. And so the idea of the rosé port is to bring a fresh, light, easy to drink port with pretty much no tannins that you can also use on cocktails. So we sell it mainly during the summertime,
Okay.
when the temperatures go up, and you can use this port, this rosé port, serve it on the rocks or mix it with a tonic or some orange juice. So there's definitely a demand for that. A lot of people criticize it more. The more conservative port geeks tend to say that rosé doesn't really reflect what port is. I have to disagree. I think that it's bringing a lot of younger consumers and female consumers to port that otherwise they wouldn't drink a very serious and austere red port.
Because of the non-popularity of sweeter style wines are losing the ability to continue to produce. And it is one of the most challenging regions to make wine in the world. So,
Yeah.
so good for you guys for coming up with another product to put out in the
Bring
market.
some diversity.
Finally.
Yeah, bring some diversity to the
Yes.
very mature port trade and consumer.
Right. I mean, it's important to bring the next generation up, realizing and understanding what it is, because at least they will be
Absolutely.
introduced to this region and understand where it is. So anyway, I digress, but yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, Bill. So red ports. We can divide the red ports into two different categories: tawny port and ruby port. Tawny is actually called after an owl that lives in England, the tawny owl. And this owl has brownish, light brown, orange brick color feathers. That's the color that port develops once matured in contact with oak, because the pores of the oak allow the air to go through it, and the color of the port is going to change from red to brown. And the longer it stays in the barrel, in cask, the lighter the brown is going to be. Eventually, after several decades, you start seeing some green nuances. It's amazing. Ruby port is named after the stone, the precious stone, the ruby, and that's a medium red, medium to dark red color. That port matures for a short period of time in stainless steel or in the bottle before it's labeled and sold. So ruby port is much closer to red wine, while the tawny port tends to be more seen as a kind of towards a liquor because of the color and the aging time that it's spent in barrel, in cask. Among the tawnies, we have two different ways of labeling them. We can blend different casks from different vintages, and then we'll call it, we indicate the age of that port, like a 10, 20, 30, or 40 years old. Or we can decide to keep it separate all the time and bottle it as a single harvest tawny, which we call colheita, which is a Portuguese word for harvest. This is the tawny. Among the rubies, we have 5 different styles of rubies. We have a young entry-level ruby, which is called just ruby. We have a reserve ruby. We have a late bottled vintage and a vintage port. And then there are a few producers that make a crusted. Crusted is, so historically, port used to be shipped in bulk, in cask. And the bottom of those casks would develop more sediment. So once the port would get to England, which was the main market, they would bottle it. And when they would start getting some sediment on the bottom, they would stop bottling and labeling it vintage port, and they would blend the sediment of the different casks they were getting and call it crusted. So crusted sometimes represents a blend of different vintages. It does not have to, but you can aggregate multiple vintages in the crusted. And it's called crusted because it has a higher concentration of sediment, and which will quicker develop a crust inside the bottle.
Excellent. And then the ruby.
So maybe we can talk a bit about, sorry, Billy, just to finish this port segment, maybe I can briefly explain how is port produced. So port is a fortified wine it basically means that we are increasing the alcohol content above 19%. Since 2 years ago, for the entry level, it can has as low as 18% alcohol. And it has some natural sweetness from the grape that was not fermented and fermented by the yeast. So it basically means that, well, to make wine, we are going to ferment all the fructose that we have in the grape juice. To make port, we are going to stop the fermentation pretty much at the halfway of the fermentation, when the sugars are down from about 200 grams, which is what you get in the grape juice, down to about 100, or drier or sweeter, depending on how much sugar you want to have in your port. And it's when we add the wine spirit, which has 77% alcohol. And when you do the addition of the wine spirit, the alcohol in the must, in the fermenting grape juice, is going to increase to about 18, 19, 20%. And at this level, the yeast dies, or it doesn't really die, it just stops processing sugars into alcohol. So this is the moment of the fortification. And this is why port, the timing is so critical for port and for the fortified wines, because if you are late, your port is going to be drier. If you come too early, then you're gonna have a sweeter port. So it's not by the second, but pretty much by the minute that we have to do the fortification.
Doing ruby ports, what are your ruby styles?
So with the ruby ports, we are actually doing all the styles of the rubies. So we do the entry-level ruby. We have a reserve ruby, which is an organic port.
Okay.
We have a late bottle vintage, typically. So we make a late bottle vintage every year, and we keep it in aging in our winery for about 6 months to a year before we release it. We have a vintage port that we produce maybe 8 times every decade. And we also have the crusted. We are one of the 4 or 5 producers making crusted.
Okay. I've not had your crusted port for sure. I have a bottle of the Cojita that I've been, yes, it's delicious. Okay. So do you guys, okay, we're talking about making port wine. And so I'm going to ask you this question because I have lots of different people when I teach classes. Do you guys do any of the foot trotting?
So historically, the port industry, or it was not actually the port industry, it was more the grape growers. Those were the producers of port. We were trading the grapes in lagar, in a lagar, which is open granite stone tank, where people would where you put the grapes pretty much into, oh, how do I don't, I mean, like probably 80 centimeters high, and then people would tread the grapes, foot tread it for about 4 hours on the first day, and then depending on how much tannins and extraction you want to get, for about 30 minutes to 2 hours during the following days. Right now we have known old style lagars. We have mechanical lagars, which use compressed air, and we have fermentation tanks. It's easier to control.
Yeah.
It's no longer so much labor dependent.
That's what I mean.
And we have a shortage of labor in the Douro. And I mean, it's maybe in the future we will gonna have a couple of like old style lagars, but more just to be able to test the difference between the automatic and manual lagars.
Okay, that's interesting. So that brings me to another question. So labor in the Douro? I mean, the vineyards are very laborious. They take a lot of work. Are most of your vineyards, are they on the very traditional Sacocos? Or are they
Yes, yes. So
on terraces?
until a few years ago, I think it's until the Douro is part of the UNESCO heritage. Pretty much all the plantations had 2 lines per terrace. Nowadays, the the steepness, the maximum steepness allowed for 2 lines per terrace changed,
Okay.
and in those steeper areas we can only plant 1 line, which is it's inefficient, but it's the way of avoiding landslides and erosion.
Right.
It's okay. But in those 1 line per hectare, 1 line per terrace vineyards, we may get as much as 2 tons per hectare,
Wow.
which is it's very very little.
Yes. So where is your labor coming from generally to harvest?
It's pretty much everyone is coming from our municipality,
Okay.
with a few exceptions. We have a couple that is immigrated from Romania, has been with us for 15 years now. Sometimes we contract a company to help us with temporary workers for a couple of weeks, so we can catch up on the works in the fields. But we have a total of about 30 people full time, maybe a bit more, 35 people full time.
Excellent. Wow. That is a lot of people for sure, but
But it's all pretty much all locals.
right. And at least a few years ago, the primary industry in the Douro is pretty much almost everybody somehow is working related to wine and port in the
Yeah,
Douro.
yeah. You
Okay.
can still see that on the number of people that own vineyards. The number in 2004 was, I think, was 24,000 people.
I have figures too, but I can't remember all.
24,000 people that were growing grapes in the Douro Valley.
It's crazy.
So if you multiply by like 4 people per household or 5 people per household, that would be more than 1% of the Portuguese population, only depending on the Douro Valley.
Mhm.
So it's a lot. Since probably 50 years that this number is shrinking. And now we may have about 16,000 people growing grapes. And of those 16,000, probably 1,500 are professionals.
Okay.
So they totally rely on the income from the vineyards,
Right.
while the others are just kind of not really a hobby, but they have other sources of income.
So what do you see as the future of Douro and the region in wine future or other?
Yeah, we are the trend has been amazing for the Douro. I think we are doing a very good job. The quality of the wines, especially the still wines, increased a lot during the last 20 years. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, no one was making still wine in the Douro to export. We are drinking it all, and we were giving it away to the workers because it was not fantastic, was not good. So since about the 2000, it has been changing a lot. First for the reds, now for the whites. I think we still have a lot of room to improve in the white wine. For the reds, is more and more difficult as the level is already, I think, quite high. 20 years ago, the level was very low, so there was a big margin to improve.
Okay.
Nowadays, I think we make world-class wines.
Okay.
So it's hard to get, now
Better.
you have to go deep in detail to be able to improve a little bit from last year. and that's more difficult. And for the whites, I think we still have some room to improve. Now, labor is getting more expensive and scarce. Grapes are getting more expensive, and I think they will continue. And we need that they keep going more expensive because the farmers are not making enough money. So I really hope that we can keep this trend going. The consumption, the exports of still wine have been increasing a lot for the last 10 years, and they will continue. Port may suffer a little bit with the increase of the cost of the grapes, will make port more expensive. And some of the cheap port sold in the supermarket, which has represents some volume of the industry, may disappear, which is totally fine if we are able to use those grapes to make still wine and keep the income and the price that per kilograms of grape paid to the growers increasing, so everyone can have a better life. And so I'm very positive about the future of the Douro, as long as we keep doing a good quality and honest and fairly priced wine. I think we can still surprise many people in the world.
So what about, do you feel like sparkling, that there might be a spark, like an
There's some
sparkling wines that emerge as an actual serious contender, even though you said white wines are a little bit more difficult and more challenging?
There are 3 projects of sparkling wine in the Douro or in the area surrounding the Douro that actually work very well. But I think the weather is not going to let us increase that
Okay.
that
Makes
segment
sense.
of the wine. But I think Portugal and especially the Douro did a great job, in the sense that 10, 15 years ago, everyone was planting all the same grapes in the world: Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Syrah, Merlot, and a couple others. And the Douro was still planting those same varieties that our ancestors selected and that no one was able to pronounce. So there was a big fight between the marketing team and the winemaker to make it easier for the consumer to identify. But maybe because we are not as good in marketing as other countries, the winemaker always won this war or this battle, and we keep resilient with the local varieties. And I think now that's paying off, as the more connoisseur wine drinker wants, what's the next level. Now I know Cabernet from Chile, from Bordeaux, and from California. So now what is a blend of a Cabernet with a Syrah and something else? And which obscure grape varieties exist in the world that make good wine? And that's when Portugal is shining. So happy that we didn't follow the easy road.
So I did want to talk a little bit about what's going on now, which is COVID-19, obviously everywhere in the world. And I wanted to get your take on what is happening. I mean, I guess in Portugal in a broader way, but in your region as well, how it's affecting it. And yeah, if you could give a little insight there.
Yeah, in terms of the primary sector of agriculture, it's okay for now. Nature didn't stop, so we still have to work in the vineyards. We still have to work in the other cultures that we plant in Portugal. And in terms of on a labor perspective, people will still be busy and they will have work. In terms of the wine, on the wine side, there is of course a stop in the sales for the restaurants and hotels. Tourism also totally stopped. So, especially on the premium side of the wine industry, it's on hold right now. It doesn't sell, and I'm afraid that the price of the grapes may go down for the next harvest, and that's a problem for the small farmers. Um, Restaurants are suffering a lot, and they will probably continue to suffer even once the economy or the society is open again and we can go out, because we are used to have a lot of tourism in Portugal, and that tourism is not going to return right after the quarantine stops. So many people are definitely going to have a hard time ahead. To give you a figure, tourism already represents 10% of the Portuguese economy. So you take away that 10% of the gross domestic product, and you have a big drama. You have a huge recession. On the other side, wine consumption at home is increasing a lot. You can see that the the liquor stores are increasing their sales. So there are some people selling more wine, like online companies. We have 4 or 5 clients that sell 100% online, and they are having they're in a better position now than before. I think the once the quarantine stops, the table is gonna change. The way we'll see the society is gonna change. We're gonna have a relative big group of losers that are going to be in a much worse position, and unemployed, and also with a very tight on cash flow. And we may have also some winners in the end. Among the wine industry, there are definitely some companies that are going to win. Those that are selling more on the lower, like entry-level wine that sell to supermarkets, I think those are going to sell more than the year before. I think the government is trying to help a little bit everyone, but more with cash. So companies are borrowing from the government, borrowing at special conditions supported by the government, but it doesn't. It's still you're still borrowing money from the bank, so you need to repay it in the future. So it means that there's still a duty of to repay this part in the future. So I don't know if you are not going to have if you are not going to lose a lot of producers. I think I have talked to a few of them in the past week, and I think that maybe 5 or 10% of them are going to go under.
And you're speaking in the Douro in Portugal, correct?
In the Douro and in Portugal.
Okay. So consumption in Portugal of wine and port, obviously port. I'm sure that what is the highest consumption in the world of port? Is it in?
So Portugal was France and Portugal were the two, like France. So the precise order is like this: Portugal, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and the UK.
Okay.
But there is a tiny market, which is, well, it's not a tiny market. It's a small country with 4.5 million people, Denmark, that consumes a lot of port per capita, and expensive port. So we cannot really look into I think for us, Denmark is much more interesting than France, and France is the biggest consumer of port.
Because
but France
the gross
drinks drinks the lower quality port, and Denmark has the available income to spend few extra dollars per bottle purchased. So that's much more interesting for us. And what we have seen now, I have seen a couple of interviews from the other port producers, and they were saying that sales of port increased about 40% in the last month. But that's for those selling to the supermarkets.
Okay, for the supermarket port.
Yeah.
So what is as far as what percentage of Portugal's GDP is from the Douro Valley or from wine? I mean,
from the wine, if I'm not wrong, wine is about 1%.
About 1% from wine?
Yeah, 1% from wine. So it's, I mean, it's something, but it's not that much. I think what is more important for the Portuguese GDP is
Tourism.
the tourism that wine attracts.
That wine attracts. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a
Which is,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, which is you of course it's measured under tourism, but it exists because of the wine industry and the wine diversities. I mean, it's not only the Douro. There are several other wine regions. Of course, the Douro is the most well known, and Porto, like the wine city. But I mean, if you come from America, from North America, you're not going to visit Porto for a couple of days and not visit other cities and other places. You stay for a few more days. So everyone, it's a win-win. Um, I honestly, Billy, at this point, I don't know how much this is going to affect. It's definitely affecting already a lot of us, especially on the people that were more dependent on restaurants. You know that Portuguese love to go out for lunch and dinner. It's relatively inexpensive to have lunch in a restaurant. And from $6, $7, $8, you can have a full meal for lunch, and it means that restaurants are very popular. So you have, I don't know, maybe over, I don't know how many people, but you have a lot of people that are in the, have like one restaurant, and it's him, the wife, and one or two relatives. So those guys are suffering a lot. Everyone can do like takeaway now, but it's, I mean, if you have not set up the takeaway
Yeah.
until now, it's not now that you're going to,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. It's not what they've been doing. It's not the culture.
I can tell you that, I mean, we eat out maybe three times a week, and we haven't done any takeaway in the last month.
Yeah.
It means that we are not helping I like personally we were not helping the restaurants because takeaways is a concept that I don't like.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
I can understand it. Right.
Yeah, I like to serve the food quickly. The concept of having someone to transport the food and more plastic and you know, it doesn't suit me.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And more environment neutral.
Right. Right. There's definitely parts of North America that don't think about that as much as the rest of the world does. What would you like to see come out of this?
Well, one thing is that it's possible to reduce the CO2 emissions. It's possible. Um, it's also possible to work more from home. Sometimes we don't have always to be in our office. Maybe we can do once a month or twice a month. Some people can definitely work from home. That way they were not working so far. Third is that I think we are, personally, I see I'm much more connected to my children than before, as we spend a lot of time together. I better understand them, and even if I get very nervous sometimes and stressed, I can see that they are still young and small, so I have to be patient, as my parents were when I was young, and yours did the same with you. Um, well, the third thing is probably that we may have went a bit too far in terms of relying on the supply chains. We every country, every region specialized in something, and now we need some supplies, some goods that we are not able to produce and not able to get because we don't have an industry for that. So I think the idea of, and this is totally against my business, but I think that the concept of going local, I think is going to should be more present in our life. Well, and the fourth, I think, is it's related to those that are going to lose their jobs, and many of them are not going to be able to get a job again because they are too old. And that's the sad part of the whole thing. We are having a lot of, I mean, the number of people that are dying is of course huge, but when you put it in perspective with the normal flu, it's still acceptable if you are able to contain it. But a lot of lives for those that stay alive are going to change, and that's a big of a drama. This is unprecedented with any of the recessions we had before. So you and I will never live a situation like this, I believe.
No, no, definitely not.
So spread, so global. We'll see. I can tell you that, and maybe this is not the right thing to say at this point, but on a business point of view, our business is still doing okay so far. So, but I'm really concerned with others that are not in a good situation. So you have it changes it's from case to case, from company to company, from household to household. We were so far of the 30 people that we employ, everyone is still being paid, even if two of them are at home because we closed our tasting room in Porto. Um, but at least we were able to keep everyone with the same cash flow that they were expecting before the virus arrived.
That's great.
Let's see if we can do this. We keep doing this, but I mean, for now we can do it. I know that for others it's impossible just because they don't sell any bottle of wine, but it's going to affect us in different ways.
So, and just, I mean, I watch every day on WHO's website, the world, and seeing what everybody's doing. So I know you have around 15,000, 14,500.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
What are the predictions about when you guys are going to peak? I mean, obviously you're so close to Spain there, but obviously everything was done like 3 or 4 weeks ago. So when do you guys, when did the government, or do they think that there might be some change for you?
Yeah. So a very interesting number is that for 2 days in a row, the number of people in the intensive care is going down.
Okay, that's good.
It's very good. The number of new infections has been below 10% for already 10 days.
Okay.
And the same for new deaths.
Okay.
Those more affected are elder people in the that are at home or in geriatric centers. And it's interesting to see that the north of Portugal, the Porto area, is by far the most affected. So there are definitely several cities that were able to do a good contention of the virus. Porto is the most exposed to the outside, on both sides, on tourism that comes, but also of a lot of small companies that export a lot of their production and that have the staff and owners have to travel a lot. So the very first cases were people on the textile and shoes industry that traveled to Italy.
Okay.
And that's what explains the fact that we have a major impact on the northeast of Portugal.
Right, the spread so fast.
Yeah. So Europe is actually trying to understand what's happening in Portugal, because it's not normal that the level is so low. So the curve is so low, so flat.
That's good.
I don't know the explanation there. Of course, I had no explanation at all. But some people mention a couple of vaccines that we use for. I mean, I don't know the names, but there are a couple of vaccines that we still give to people, to the child that Spain, for instance, stopped some years ago or a few decades ago. So we may be immune, or more people may be immune to the virus than in Spain or Italy.
I see. So globally, then, do you see anything good coming out of this? I mean, or do you hope for something? Do you hope for something?
I think this is a missed opportunity, as our leaders had a great occasion to cooperate, to work together, to unite further the countries and the people, and it's happening the opposite. Um, some blame China for the virus, others blame religion, others blame this. I mean that uh, on a European level, I would like to see more solidarity across countries. I know that once again are the southern countries that are asking for more help than the northern countries. It's true, it's happening now. It's again Italy, it's again Spain. This time, not as much Portugal, but this time, because 10 years ago was different. Um, but I think we should work together on this. I think more cooperation, as you can see on some scientific fields, would be amazing if you see it on a political level as well. And we are not seeing that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess we could talk for a long, long time. But put this up on my website for sure. And I do have one other question that I'd like to ask you. That is, what is one of your favorite wine experiences that is not necessarily that is a wine anywhere in the world, or a time anywhere in the world, or other than port? I mean, I have to remove port from it because this is your region.
So other than port?
Yes, other than port, what's one of your most memorable wine experiences? And thankfully, I'm not a winemaker, so you don't have to pull my.
Yeah, I will tell you what it is. It was a trip that I did with a friend, Luis Alberto. Luis is a big wine lover. He created a wine lover community, and 10 years ago, around 10 years ago, we decided to go to Hungary to do some training on port for a couple of WSET academies. And at the end of our training sessions and tastings, we went to Tokai to visit Tokai. And I think Tokai is one of the most undervalued and underpriced and to be discovered wines in the world. And I had opportunity of tasting some amazing, beautiful, unique Tokais that I don't know if it's gonna happen again. But during that visit, I also tasted the Essencia. I don't know if you are familiar with Essencia.
I am familiar with Essencia, yes.
So Essencia, which results from the not pressed botrytized grapes. So the drops of those not pressed grapes that is have a concentration of sugar of like 60%, and it's like honey, but it's wine. And that's probably the most like unforgettable experience that I had. Maybe because I was not expecting that to be given to me, and that I would be so welcome, and people would open their cellars and doors so easily to a foreigner. But that's thanks to Luis Alberto, who had his network of friends in there.
That's awesome. And is Luis is he from the Douro as well?
No, Luis is from Brazil, from from São Paulo area, and he's living in Boston.
Okay. Oh wow.
He's living in Boston.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And he also he started the Master of Wine program as well.
Ah, wonderful. Recently?
No, I think was after we went to Tokai or during our visit to Tokai.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah. Before you finish, let me just tell you which was my um, eh, the biggest experience I had with port. So I was in the house in the house of a friend here in Porto, and his father has so the so the family, their family was the previous owners of Quinta do Noval.
Okay.
It's one of the old quintas in the Douro, and they still have some port in their cellar from the 18th century.
Oh,
So
wow.
we bring up a bottle from 1827. Yeah, and he opened the bottle, and then we made a project together. We made a 20-year-old also for them. But I mean, he opens this bottle of 1827 and with a lot of mold over the cork and neck, a lot of dust. I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing.
And was it amazing? Was it delicious? Was it?
And I mean, it was far from the best port that I ever drank.
Yeah. It's,
But the flavors and the aromas, the experience that you get, it's it has you can't compare with anything else. It's you get flavors and things that you never thought it exist.
I get it.
It creates a new spectrum of of experience,
Right, right,
and you understand that this was already maybe we were 100 years late in opening that bottle,
right.
but having the opportunity of tasting something so unique, it's fantastic.
Yeah. I've tasted a couple of old bottles that, I mean, not that old, nothing from the 1800s, from the early 1900s. Actually, I had something from 1892. It was a Bordeaux. And yeah,
Wow.
it was off. It was in somebody's cellar here in Nashville, and it, was way down below the shoulders. But just to taste something that came from that time period, that what was going on at that time, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it is an amazing experience, it really is. So one thing that we didn't talk about that I do want. So your still wines. What are the still wines that you guys make?
Yeah. So still, we didn't talk actually about that.
Yeah.
Still wine's production has been taking more and more grapes of the Douro Valley.
Okay.
So it means that they're getting more popular.
And this is you
Um,
guys. I mean, this is you guys, right?
we have been growing. I would say about 15 to 20% every year during the last 10 years on the Douro wines,
Okay.
easily, if not more. US is a very good market for us. England, France. Can you imagine? We export a lot of still wine to France.
That's
Really big,
that's
really, really, and a little bit everywhere. I think a little bit everywhere. And tourism has helped a lot because people come to Portugal, they enjoy the wine, they like it, they go back home, they want to drink it. So we have three ranges of still wine.
okay.
One that the more easy drinking, young, fruit driven, more easier to have, which is the Oscars range, in which we have white, rosé, and red. And then we have the more complex, mature, more elaborated Claudius,
Mm-hmm.
which has my sister's name. And this is matured in oak, the white for about 8 months, the red for about 12 months. And then we have our flagship Douro Red, which is, we call it Q for Quevedo and for Quinta. And this is a red that it's like the best barrels that we get from a couple of very old vineyards that have been in the family for over 100 years. One of the vineyards that have been in the family for over 100 years, Quinta da Alegria, and that's our Q. So we have these three ranges of
Ah,
wines,
that's excellent.
and
So
they have been drying most of our growth.
And is
as the
Q
consumption of port
available?
is pretty much flat.
Oh, sorry. Is
As the consumption of port is pretty much flat,
flat? Yeah. Okay.
it's the still wines that is driving the growth.
Okay. Well, and full disclosure here, I'm so looking forward to coming in October to do harvest.
You'll be very welcome.
Yes.
You're waiting for your help, Billy.
Well, good, good. I mean, I realize that my wardrobe that I come with packed will have to be just very, 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 I won't have to worry about it. Just jeans and boots will be good.
Exactly.
Thank you,
Exactly.
Oscar, so much
Thank you.
for taking the time to do this with me today. And it looks like it's a beautiful day there. It's probably almost time for a glass of, what do you, no?
It rained. It rained. You
Rain?
know, I came outside. I'm at my house, and I decided to come to the garden. Just when you start talking, we had two kids sleeping. Now the three are awake, and I can start hearing them yelling and crying. So I'm lucky that it's not raining yet.